to cover local news up here in our neck of the woods in North Carolina. So up here today, we've got a couple stories from Wake County and Durham. If to the two or three people watching this, you may notice I am not at my peak performance. There is a virus going around. I've been a bit sick this week, but I still managed to look into some hopefully interesting stories to bring y'all to keep you a little bit informed of what is going on locally. So let's jump right into it. And up here at the top, we have the State Board of Elections dismisses complaints over Wake Board of Elections illegally counting dead voters. So this is a story. It relates to back in the previous general election. Basically, what happens is that um, in under North Carolina election law, what is supposed to happen is that your eligibility to vote in the election is determined by your status on election day. So if you cast a vote by mail, if you cast a vote through early voting, but unfortunately you pass away before election day, that vote should not be counted under North Carolina law because when the law was written, voting on election day was the thing to do. And so that's still how the qualification reads. That is the guidance from the State Board of Elections. But but the Wake County Board of Elections decided to flout that law and that guidance by voting to count the votes of 3 voters who had died um, between when they cast the vote and election day. So these are voters that were believed to be alive when they cast their vote. And what's interesting is that the Wake County Board of Elections had 45 voters who had died between when they cast their vote and election day, but they only chose to count these 3 voters. And so it's pretty obvious to me that that is evidence that this is not a consistent policy, but rather that they want the law to be changed. And that's even exactly what they told media at the time. If you look back. Yeah, so basically, it was ABC 11 who is there to cover the story, and basically we have the 3 Democrats on the board. One of them, what he said was, "It's evidence that they voted, that that was their ballot, and that the law, which is meant to defend against other people voting a dead person's ballot, is out of date." So basically, they're saying, "We don't like the law, so we're not going to follow the law." Another member of the Board of Elections, Porter, "It's something I feel passionate about, and I'll be there the whole way if needed." Once again, it's about feeling passionately that the law should be changed, not about the belief that this is what the law currently says. And finally, we have Gary Cohen. You can find him on Twitter talking about all sorts of election law. Um, and what he said is one way to get the law changed, I think, perhaps, is to make some noise about it. And so what I interpreted this to mean is that these Wake Board of Election members definitely knew that what they were doing was against the law in voting to count um, the votes of voters who had died before election day, but they went ahead and do it anyway. So several citizens filed complaints and said, "Hey, you have these Board of Election members. They are choosing to not follow the law. So what is the Board of Elections going to do?" Well, we know what they did back in 2022 when there's a complaint about 2 Republican members of the Surrey County Board of Elections. Now, the way boards of elections work in North Carolina is that um, across the whole state, it doesn't matter the particular partisan leanings in the county, but across the whole state, if the every board of elections has 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans. This basically reflects it reflects the partisan whoever is holding the governor's office. Their party has the majority in every single county board of elections as well as the state board of elections. So in 2022 in Surrey County, this is a rural North Carolina county. You had the 2 Republican members of the board. They basically wrote a letter saying, "Hey, there's some election integrity concerns. We don't think they've been properly um, addressed by the time we're supposed to vote to certify this election. So we're not going to vote to certify that." And so, just for not voting to certify the elections, these 2 members were removed from their positions by the state board of elections based on the idea that they're county board of elections members, so they're just supposed to certify whatever happens. And the complaint against them wasn't even made by one of the citizens of Surrey County. It was made by, if I recall correctly, it was a citizen of Orange County. So halfway across the state, someone files a complaint. The state board of elections votes to remove these two Surrey County board members. But in this case, what do we see? When Wake County Board of Election members who are Democrats decide, hey, we're not going to listen to the State Board of Election guidance. We're just going to do what we want. What does the State Board of Elections do? Nothing. They vote in a party line. The Democrat majority votes to say, nope, we're going to let it alone. We're not huge fans of this, but are we going to do anything about this? No, we are not going to do anything about this. And so that is what happened this week. And we also had this national news, but also had an effect locally, which is President Donald Trump took office, and one of his actions was to pardon the January 6th defendants. Now, I am, of course, a January 6th defendant, but unlike the vast majority of the defendants, I was not at the Capitol because I support Trump. I was at the Capitol to document what was happening as an independent journalist. A little like what I am doing here tonight, except this broadcast has a little less legal liability. So I was arrested early on in 2021. I fought my court case for 3 years, tried to make the journalist arguments, the First Amendment arguments. We ended up going to a trial, a jury trial, and I got exactly the result that I was expecting in DC, which was, a fully guilty verdict from the jury there. But I was only sentenced to 12 months probation, and I just finished up that probation just a few days before the inauguration. So the pardon for me didn't mean as much as it meant for some of the defendants who are still serving their sentences, or those who had their cases dropped, who had yet to go to trial, had yet to plead guilty, or had yet to be sentenced. But we had quite a few, or quite a, I guess, a small handful of defendants here in Wake County. We are the largest county in North Carolina, and although Wake County does lean Democrat, there's a significant minority of Republicans in Wake County. There are more Republicans in Wake County than there are in any other county in North Carolina. So one Wake County defendant who was pardoned this week was James Grant. I had the opportunity to interview him this week. You can find that interview over at my website, thisweekinthetriangle.com. So basically, I sat down with him, talked to him for an hour. This is an NC State law student who went to the Capitol on January 6th, and he actually got involved in some of the very first incident that could be qualified as rioting that occurred on Capitol grounds, which was when some of the Trump supporters sort of charged forward and began pushing a fence that the Capitol Police were on the other side of. So he was involved in that. He ended up being arrested, going to jail. When he went to trial, he ended up beating 5 out of the 9 felonies he was charged with, and he was sentenced to 36 months incarceration. So he just got out of that around September of last year. But since I was on probation, I was not allowed to have contact with any felons, so I wasn't able to sit down and do this interview with him until just last week. So I I published that interview this week. Once again, you can read that at thisweekinthetriangle.com. So he is, one defendant from Wake County, probably more controversial defendant that was pardoned. A lot of people have brought up the issue of, hey, why is Trump pardoning defendants who are charged or who were convicted of assaulting police officers? And I think the answer that has been given, even by Vice President Vance, is that in all of these cases, the due process rights were not followed. They were not treated as any other cases. And you can look at all the leftists in DC who are regularly prosecuted, and they are not prosecuted in the same way. Often they are even not prosecuted under the same set of laws. They're not prosecuted in the same court system. The January 6th defendants were charged under the US Code in the DC District Court. And the minimum, sort of punishment there is you plead guilty to a misdemeanor, and the minimum punishment is felony probation. Whereas with the leftist protesters who are often arrested in DC, they're charged under the DC code in the DC Superior Court. And in that case, the minimum punishment is this pretrial dismissal where you do some community service, you pay a small fine, and the charges are dismissed. That's what AOC got when she did her little stunt not too far back. I believe that was an abortion related protest, where she was pretending to be handcuffed, and so she was charged. I think she had to pay like a $90 fine or something. So you can clearly see the disparity there. They're not even charged under the same laws. They're not charged under the same courts. So even someone who is convicted of what James Grant did, which is push a fence that a police officer was on the other side of, you know, just because he was convicted of that does not mean that he was treated in the same way that a protest related offense that was for a different cause would have been treated, or that all of his due process rights were respected. And finally, another local who was pardoned is independent journalist Steve Baker. Now he's a reporter with the Blaze now, but on January 6th, he was an independent journalist. So he went out from North Carolina to DC. He had uh, I guess, a website or a Facebook page called The Pragmatic Constitutionalist. That's where he was posting at the time. He intended to go up, record some man on the street interviews with Trump supporters about the rally, about the Kraken. I believe it was the Kraken that was supposed to be released on January 6th. That ended up not being what happening, but he saw what was going on in the Capitol, and like me, he said, "This is a very newsworthy event." And so he, like me, went into the Capitol. I think he recorded a little better video than I did. He recorded Ashley Babbitt being taken out after she had been shot. He was there for some key moments. And the federal government actually waited quite a while to go after him. It was just last year, after he had done quite a bit of reporting that was embarrassing to the federal government, both on the law enforcement. I believe some of it was related to the pipe bombs. Basically, his reporting did not reflect kindly on the federal government, what they had done both before and after January 6th. And so they ended up charging him. Now, Baker had not been convicted. He had not had a judgment of guilt entered against him. So technically, he was not pardoned. He just had his charges dropped. Okay, so he was never convicted at all, but the charges were dropped. And I think that is a very positive outcome. I don't like to see journalists prosecuted for doing journalism. In this case, it's a journalist whose work I like. Even if it's a journalist whose work I don't like, I still don't want to see them prosecuted for for doing their coverage. So our next story is from over in Durham, and this has been attracting some attention. Apparently, there is a resident of Durham who has a Thought Patrol truck that has been painted to look like an ICE or I guess maybe Customs and Border Patrol vehicle. So you can see it says Thought Patrol on the back and National Thoughtish Behavior Prevention. So basically, it's this parody vehicle, but if you see it from a distance, you might look and say, "Oh no, it's the immigration. They're going to come. They're going to come deport us because they're all illegal immigrants living in Durham." And apparently, this has attracted enough attention that the Hispanic store chain Compare Foods, I believe it's Compare, maybe it's Compare, but I believe it's Compare. They issued a statement both in Spanish and English, uh, basically saying, "Oh, this is a harmful prank, a harmful prank." You know, you see Durham police driving around all the time. Maybe you see a Durham sheriff. You don't worry about that unless you are breaking Durham laws. Well, you don't have to worry about an ice truck unless you are breaking immigration laws. So what does Compare Foods have to say? Well, they say, uh, what's most concerning is that these actions were carried out with clear malicious intent aimed at spreading fear and misinformation in a time when our community is already in a fragile and sensitive climate. Fear, especially in such uncertain times, can spread like wildfire, and we are committed to standing against those who seek to exploit these vulnerabilities. So I and also they say, um, where is it? To address this situation, we have filed a police report and are pursuing legal action against the individuals responsible. So I find that a little ironic that they're going to the police because they are scared that they're violating that their customers are violating immigration law and will be afraid of the ICE truck, but they're going to the police to complain about the parody truck that is causing their customers to feel fear. Um, I do find that a bit ironic. And one thing that is certainly going on is that the Democrats, the left wingers, are certainly kind of the more radical ones. That the activists, they're certainly paying attention to this immigration stuff. Um, there's if you been paying attention on the internet, there's some code words they use, like I believe winter boots, to discuss ICE to track them, report where they're seeing ICE vehicles and whatnot. There's just an event, I guess two events. Um, Last Saturday in Raleigh and Durham, Ice Watch training. These were organized by Siembra NC. And I think I kind of I'm not happy to see this, and it'll certainly be a tragedy, but I strongly suspect that we are going to see some sort of violence against ICE agents, and this is more likely to be from leftists and leftist activists, the Antifa types, the radicals, than it is the illegals themselves who are being deported. But I'm that is my gut feeling. Just seeing the level of organizing, obviously the vast majority of people um, who are liking posts about tracking ICE, the people are posting pictures of ICE vehicles. The vast majority of those will never engage in violence. But when you have enough critical mass, they sort of provide the social cover and and the information and whatnot for those very few radicals who are willing to take violent action, who may feel empowered to do so. And it's it's enough of the anti-ICE sentiment, the pro illegal immigration sentiment being expressed that unfortunately that is something that I think may happen relatively soon. And finally, we have a story out of Wake County. Um, so this is related to the Wake GOP. So, I tend to report on more conservative news. So the Wake GOP, like I mentioned a little earlier in the broadcast, Wake County has more Republicans than any other county in the state. So they're not winning many statewide offices in Wake County because most of the county, Raleigh certainly, even Cary, uh, they're they are dominated by Democrats, but yet they have this huge number of Republican residents as well. So the Wake GOP, kind of important not just for the offices in Wake County, but for the whole state, because every statewide office, every president, they need those Republican votes in Wake County, or they will not win the state. Um, but there are some hijinks going on over at the Wake GOP. Um, the current administration is not too popular, at least not with me. They kind of jerked me around last convention. But I don't hold grudges. I don't hold grudges. But what they have done this year is they have announced that the precinct meetings, which are usually held, I believe, a couple weeks before the convention to elect delegates to the convention, instead they're going to hold those all 1 hour before the convention at the state fairgrounds while they're holding the convention. So basically, you have to go to the Wake GOP convention, you have your precinct meeting, and then immediately go into the convention. This will probably extend what will already be a very long night. I believe they still have some issues with the party's constitution or plan of organization that they need to address. They also do the wake they do the party leadership election in the off year. So that will be happening this year. So you can probably expect a very long convention. I've heard from opponents of the current leadership that they see this as a move to reduce attendance. Um, to presumably kind of make it more difficult for the opposition. Uh, I'm not sure if that's exactly specifically why they're doing it, but it doesn't really seem like a very um, I don't know. I don't really understand the move because I went to the precinct meeting last year, and it actually was an opportunity for the current leadership to address, each precinct, each group of delegates, speak to them directly, hear from them directly. So if I if I was the current leadership, I would definitely want to hold these meetings because it would give me an additional opportunity to reach out and speak to the delegates who would be voting for me. But apparently, that's not how it will be happening this year. So the current slate of the Wake GOP leadership is being challenged by One Wake, which is led by Sandy Joyner. She was formerly president of the Western Wake Republican Club. If you're active in politics here, you probably know exactly who she is, and they've already attracted a whole bunch of endorsements. From people like our two Republican representatives here in Wake County, Mike Sheetzold and Aaron Perret. Um, former Sheriff Donnie Harrison, all big names in the the Republican politics here locally. And so those are all the stories for this week. If you go to thisweekinthetriangle.com, you can put in your email. I get these stories in your inbox each week, to kind of hear what's going on with local news from a conservative editorial perspective to provide you with an alternative to the left-wing dominated local mainstream media, the News and Observer, WRAL, ABC 11, Indy, whatnot. If you're tired of all of those, if you're a conservative, but you want to hear what's going on locally, then once again, head over to thisweekinthetriangle.com. And with with that, I will be signing off so I can cough myself to death in peace.